Surprise, surprise. It's me. It's me, folks. And yes, yesterday, I'll throw this typical pastor joke out there. I ran my sermon and my message by Sarah Beth and asked her if what she would take out. So, in conclusion, no, sorry, I had to make one dumb joke. But hey, I wanna start us out with the primary text of the day, and this is coming from Exodus 13, 17 through 18. And it says this: when the Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. And the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt, equipped for battle. So we get this picture here. If many of you remember what's going on here, we've heard this story since we were children about the Israelites fleeing Egypt. But what's very interesting in this text is there is somewhat of a plan, an exit strategy. And the exit strategy is to look lost. Going south instead of north. This strategy makes no sense. So why does God do this? He does this to forge character and to cultivate intimacy. You see, for me, back in 2011, I would say it's about September, I found myself standing on a corner in New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. And I was waiting for a bus to go back to my flat. For us Americans in the States, my apartment. Thanks, Mark. The only person in the room knows what a flat is. To go back to my flat, and in that moment was one of the most loneliest moments of my life, but at the same time, one of the most pivotal for me. When I stepped onto that bus, I just started listening to, and the band will appreciate this, a new EP had come out by All Sons and Daughters. And if I say All Sons and Daughters, you're probably going to remember, if I say this, our anthem here, Great Are You, Lord. But they had this song called Reason to Sing. And the reason that I tell you this is, for me, God had led me into this season, but it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense of what he called me into at this point. I was so sure of it. I was so sure of his calling, but it didn't make sense. I want to show you a picture of a map. If you see this broken red line, you can see it's going south to go north, and then wanders around and then keeps going up over here to Canaan. No, this is not a map of my mother getting lost in Walmart parking lot trying to find her car. This is what the Israelites did. So in verses 17 and 18, if you look there with me, it's giving us a window into God's motivation for the Israelites, and it's giving us a window into the understanding complicated and confusing seasons when what God's doing, it just doesn't make sense. One of my favorite pastors back when I was in college was Pastor Ben Stewart, who's actually a pastor now at Passion City, if you're aware of it. But he was leading Breakaway Ministries at Texas A&M, and I got real involved in listening to their podcast. And he spoke on this very same topic. And if you want to write this down, I encourage you to do this because it's just one of the most beautiful ways into summarizing what the Israelites are experiencing. And he says this: it is in the heat of the desert, God forges character. And it's in the loneliness of the wilderness, he cultivates intimacy. And we see this repeated all throughout many, many heroes of the faith of promises given, but really no timeline. Let me name off just a few. Abraham, 25 before Isaac was born. Joseph, 13 years through slavery and imprisonment before becoming Egypt's governor. Moses, 40 years of tending sheep. David, roughly 15 to 20 years before becoming king over all of Israel. Hannah, there's a time of waiting, it's unknown, but she was persistent in trust and prayer for a child. Joshua waited nearly 40 years serving under Moses before taking leadership. And Caleb, age 85, finally after 45 years, because of Israel's wilderness wandering, got to experience his inheritance of the promised land. And you may look at me this morning and say, Adam, but why is all this necessary? Why does this happen? Why does it happen to the heroes of the faith? Why does it happen to me? All I can say for me this morning in my testimony is for me, I simply wasn't ready for what God had in store. I needed God to shape me for the next season that he had for me. I needed to cultivate more in my relationship with him. Let me briefly connect chapter 14 because there's a lot going on here. And I'll just summarize it in this. This is before the Israelites cross over into the Red Sea. You look at verse 1 through 3. God tells Moses, have them back themselves into a trap between the Pharaoh and his armies in the Red Sea. And by this logic, any logic, this is insanity, right? From the outside looking in, it couldn't be any more chaotic. But then we skip down to this crucial verse. In verse 17 and 18 of chapter 14 of Exodus, it says this, and I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go in after them. And lean into this, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Why does God put us in circumstances that we feel uncomfortable? Places of crisis? Why did I move all the way to Australia for a worship leadership college to find out just months later that it all fell apart, or it seemed that way to me? Is to display his glory. He does that to display his glory. But he's got to first shape our character and cultivate intimacy with him. And as your brother thought long and hard over this week, I want to speak candidly to you, my church. If I'm honest, our church has walked through a very, very similar experience. Can we agree? This year has had its share of grief and confusion, pastors leaving, members coming and going, let alone the experience of disaffiliating, although that turned out great, and COVID. It's been several years of ups and downs at times. In all my 12 years, guess what he's been? He's been faithful. And you know what I believe this morning? In my experience, in my faith journey with him, is this is the moments that he wants to display his glory the most. This is our chance to allow him to display his glory in us and through us. I want to circle back to Moses' act in Exodus 13, verse 19. Because this bit right here seems very this information seems very strange, and it's tagged on. And I'm going to read it for us to give you context. It says this: Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here. This seemingly small detail carries a significant historical and theological meaning. If I were to scroll you back to Genesis 50, and I'll read this for us, it's the same thing again, where Joseph is planning this out. And Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of the land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. And then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear again, God will surely visit you and shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him and they put him in a coffin in Egypt. And decades passed. Probably 200 years there. Decades passed. Joseph was forgotten. His mummified body's just sitting in Egypt. But what Joseph is doing here is telling a really beautiful story for us all. Joseph planned for the Exodus centuries in advance. He had faith for what God had for the Israelites, for the next generation. So this very act of Moses demonstrates, and I want you, if you got your phone out or a pen and paper, I want you to write this down. This act of Moses demonstrates God's faithfulness. God remembering his covenant with Abraham, a great nation, a land of Canaan, and a blessing to all nations, as well as is demonstrating Joseph's faith. Again, if we're all familiar with the book of Hebrews, we got the faith narrative in the Hebrews 11. By faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the Exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones by faith. What Moses does, church, is tells us Israel's identity and inheritance was never meant to be in the comfort of Egypt. The act of carrying Joseph's bones, it signified that God has more. And there's a legacy of faith that Moses is living out here. And it's a generational kind of faith, a Joseph kind of faith, a faith that believes beyond the seasons that we're in. Maybe just like Joseph, even beyond what our eyes may never see. So why am I telling us this morning? It's something as a church that we can put into practice. You see, we carry as a church, we carry a legacy. We carry a story of faith that is not meant for us to hold on to and keep to ourselves. It's not something just to acknowledge and receive God's promises and blessings, but it's living out my identity, inheritance of faith. I firmly believe that when we are allowing God to forge character in us and cultivate intimacy, we get to experience the complete joy of our identity and in our inheritance. I want to show you guys another picture. Try not to get emotional. You see that man up there at the top? That's Reverend Robert Walker. Brother Walker preached for roughly 65 years, Southern Baptist pastor. Don't hold it against me. But you know who that man was? That's my pawpaw. And my pawpaw handed down something that can never be taken away from me. And it's a legacy of faith. And you see those four just below that. It's my job. It's my calling to pass that to them, to give that to them. I'm not supposed to stay in the comfort of Egypt. I'm supposed to go move towards my identity and my inheritance. Carrying this legacy of those who made their mark on us as well for generations. And this morning, I don't think it's by chance that one of those men was my music minister when I was a teenager in high school. His name's Mark Jones. And today he's on palliative care at St. Dominic's. And the mark that he made on me wasn't his talent or how the songs he chose. It was the place he sang from. It was his conviction. It was his love for Jesus. It may not happen many times, but the still image that I have in my mind is a picture of him crying and weeping while he's singing. That's the legacy that I get to carry, to pass on. And so this morning, maybe it's your calling to be the one to carry the bones of Joseph, to remind this church, your family, of God's faithfulness to the generations. Maybe it's to remind us of our identity. Maybe it just might look like you leading us into the next season God has for us at this church, reminding us of our inheritance, of God's goodness and his promises. I want to introduce you to one more person. Some of you may have read some of Brother Lawrence's work. He's known for the practice of the presence of God. And Brother Lawrence, this was a book that our work staff read when I worked at Lake Forest Ranch. And the point of them reading this was they were doing some of the work that was behind the scenes, working in the kitchen, working ropes, doing support staff things. And the beauty of Brother Lawrence was late in his adulthood life, after he had left the army, he decided to join this French monastery. And I'll just read this to you. Brother Lawrence expected that entering the monastery would involve great spiritual struggles. But instead, he gradually learned that the key to the Christian life was not extraordinary experiences, but continually turning his heart toward God throughout the day, washing pots, preparing meals, or mending shoes as acts of worship. He's quoted as saying this: "The time of business does not differ with me from the time of prayer. And in the noise of clatter of my kitchen, I possess God in great tranquility, as if I were upon my knees." You may say to me this morning, "Adam, this all sounds great. Letting God cultivate intimacy in me, forging character, leaving a legacy. But I'm not you. I'm not in vocational ministry. I'm not David. I'm not Moses. I'm not Abraham. I'm not Joseph. But my call to you this morning, and Sarah Beth and I actually talked about this a lot last night, I just simply encourage you just to take this posture of Brother Lawrence, just doing the menial task, just praying, just inviting the extraordinary God into our ordinary circumstances. If you want a starting place and you want to make an impact for the generations to come, to leave your legacy, that's it. Begin with prayer. When Neil was around here, I can't tell you how many times I heard him say, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, God will heal their land." My encouragement to you this morning It's not to sit and beat yourself up trying to figure out how God's cultivating intimacy in you and forging character. He's going to do that. But I know that a good starting place is practicing his presence and doing that by prayer. Menial things. I began this conversation with you guys this morning, sharing a season of hardship and loneliness for me. And I would love to tell you that I quickly stepped out of that season, but I didn't. Matter of fact, it was no bed of roses. It rolled on for nearly 3 years of confusion, questioning my calling, even addiction, and yes, depression. But you know what? All that cultivating of intimacy and all that forging of character in that season, it was worth it. It was worth it all to display his glory, to get to pass on a legacy of his faithfulness to my children, to the generations to come, of his character, of his goodness, of his kindness. Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising shame, and seated at the right hand of the throne of God. I thought about keeping y'all here past lunch, but I wanted to keep it simple because I know I needed to hear this. This is the prayer that I want to invite us to pray. Won't you stand? God, if you seek to display your glory in me, Holy Spirit, would you give me the courage to step into whatever you have called upon me today? The moments that we enter into where there's such surety of your calling and your voice, and we get in the middle of that season and things change, things become chaotic or even confusing. The things that we have experienced here at this church, God, would you use it to forge more character in us? God, would you use it to cultivate intimacy with the Father? And lastly, because of that, Lord, may we experience the full joy of our inheritance. And who you called us to be, to leave a legacy of faith, declaring who you are, your goodness, your character, your love, your steadfastness, your faithfulness towards us. God, you're not done with us yet. You're not done with us yet. Display your glory in me today. And all God's people said, amen.